for joining us. We're just going to give people 30 seconds or so, anyone who's still trying to join us before we get started. So I'd just like to say thank you very much for joining us. We're going to be going through some top tips of how we can reopen safely. There's some additional information on staff and management controls as well. We have some guides and resources which we'll be sharing links to at the end of this. And we've created a number of services which can help you with your safety processes. So just some introductions from us. I'm Dan, so I'm the head of marketing at Navitas, and I'm going to be the host for this webinar. And I'm joined by Kirsty, who's our regional manager and health and safety expert.
Hi, welcome. Thanks for joining, and I hope you find this useful.
Thanks, Kirsty. So we're just going to do a bit of introduction. So if you've never heard of Navitas before, we're health, fire and food safety experts, and we've been in operation since 1989. And our mission is to make keeping your people, customers, reputation safe really easy. And we do this by providing expertise and all the know-how you need around your health and safety processes. And we have a range of software, hardware, and digital tools to make compliance processes really, really simple. And we'll be touching on some of those later on, should you be interested. Throughout this webinar, I just want to let you know that if you do have any questions, you can send them to us on the right-hand side. One of our moderators will be able to respond to those. And if there are loads and loads of questions that we can't get back to during the webinar, we'll make sure to reach out afterwards and get the answers that you need. So just to start off, we just wanted to share the government's phased reopening plan with you. So I must caveat this with when we produced this webinar and these slides, this was correct. They are subject to change and obviously in line with the COVID situation and what's happening. But as it stands, this is currently kind of what we're looking for when businesses can reopen. So as you know, currently garden centres, hardware stores and things of that nature are able to reopen where social distancing measures can be maintained and obviously very, very high and strict cleaning practices. And phase two, we're looking at small retail outlets with a small number of staff through to phase three, which is covering things like cafes and restaurants, providing premises, food and drink on premises. Again, all of these are with like food and safety best practices being able to put in place, so things like social distancing measures, and it does state that these are limited to retail outlets with a street level entrance and exits. So if you are within an enclosed shopping centre, as it stands, the measures are that you won't be able to open just yet because of the risk associated with enclosed shopping centres. Phase four, we're looking at things like hairdressers. So we have some guidance that's coming up in this webinar around what hairdressers and beauty places can do to keep themselves safe. So these are kind of classed as more high risk services because of the level of contact you need with your customers. And also hotels, hostels and caravan parks and things of that nature are also able to open around about this time. But it's also key that the hotel bars are to remain closed at this stage. And finally, we're into kind of phase five. If everything goes ahead, where we've got pubs and bars, nightclubs, casinos, and things of that nature are going to be able to open. But again, all of these steps are with the principles that social distancing, strict cleaning, and really, really clear measures are in place to maintain safety. I'm just going to hand over to Kirsty now, who's going to be taking you through some of our guidance and some top tips on how you can ensure safety for your business.
Yeah, as Dan says, we have got the phased reopening proposal in line with the government. We are at the early stages of that timeline at the minute. It will remain under close review due to the seriousness of the pandemic. We are going to be guided by science and case numbers to avoid a second peak, and the controls may be adjusted along the way. If things are put into place and given the go-ahead and then potentially don't work, then we may need to see some slight adjustments as we progress. But planning is important, so we need to start to look at what can be done in advance in terms of preparation for reopening. So we're looking at these 7 things that we can do. All of our guidance is looking at different sectors. So we've brought all of the sector guidance together to try and summarise it into 7 key steps. The first one, though, does look at temporarily changing the way you operate. So some small retailers have successfully moved to selling their wares online. They've got good collection and delivery arrangements, so they have contactless controls in place, for example. Takeaways are able to trade, but they do have to have very strict controls in terms of collection. Restaurants and other similar hospitality premises are in that close down phase at the moment, or caretaking phase. You can look at adjusting the way that you operate within a restaurant premises to having a takeaway service, just to keep that revenue stream going. You may need certain permissions from planning and local authorities, so do bear that in mind. But you could look to consider operating your currently closed takeaway restaurant premises as a takeaway operation. You will need to put controls in place with regards to social distancing, hygiene, and other additional protective measures, which we'll talk about. The second step or procedure to consider is to designate a COVID champion. Everyone's commitment is required for this to work, for this reopening to work, the phased approach to work. So we all need to be committed to that. However, what we thought would be beneficial is if someone took control or took the lead within each premise, even within each department of a premises or operation, and to have someone designated or a number of people designated as COVID champions. This obviously gives ownership and accountability. So what we would expect is the COVID champions to be carrying out daily checks on the controls that have been agreed and should be in place. And it allows for continual improvement and continual review and adjustment of those controls. It also puts in place a good reporting structure. So a team member would be able to go to the COVID champion and report an issue or a concern, and then that can be escalated up through the business. So we've got a good way of being able to monitor and continually adjust and review. This is important because a lot of insurance companies will expect to see evidence of businesses reviewing their control measures constantly, just to make sure that they are suitable and that they remain suitable in the event of any changes. So just on the back of that, all staff, regardless of whether you're going to be a champion or not, all staff should undergo general awareness training as well. But it would be the champion that would kind of take the lead and look at the overall management of COVID controls in the workplace. And the system that we've got available is a daily checklist, and it's available online. It can be done on an app or a tablet, so it's easy to complete from a practical point of view through the day-to-day operations. The third point to look at is sanitising and cleanliness. So every business must enhance their cleaning. It will be the new approach. It will be the new way of working. It's really important to consider the type of business you've got. You might have a lot of soft fabrics in a hotel bedroom, for example, or in a restaurant. And obviously soft and hard surfaces need to be slightly differently and to different frequencies. So what we would expect is a full cleaning schedule to be put into place. You can either adjust and enhance the existing cleaning schedule you have, or put a new tailored cleaning schedule in place. So it could cover things like touch point cleaning and how you clean and how often you clean. We would recommend that high touch points, very frequently touched points throughout a business, not just in the kitchen, but across a whole premises, should be cleaned every 30 minutes. And we would also recommend hand washing to be completed every 20 minutes by everybody. We've looked at tips for monitoring this. Again, the COVID champion could take that role, but also you could look at putting timers or alarms into place, which would trigger and remind people to wash their hands. Again, it's important to have looked at the customer journey and the staff member journey within a premises, and have hand washing and hygiene stations and cleaning stations at pertinent points, especially exit and entry. Goods in, for example, staff clocking in areas. So all of these key points should have, at the very least, alcohol hand sanitizer available and sanitizing wipes. Also, an element to consider is about business delivery procedures. So how goods are coming into the operation and how they're being handled and safely decanted. And that does extend to guidance we've provided on handling food. However, the risk linked to, in terms of risk of transmission linked to food is reported to be fairly low. So the key things are hand hygiene and touch point and surface cleaning. Moving on to the fourth element of the steps that you can look to put into place, we're considering the coronavirus PPE requirement. So it is a very hot topic. It's a great talking point. Everybody's got lots of different opinions on PPE and face masks, face visors, etc. And there's some potentially conflicting information out there at the moment, so it can be a little bit confusing. What we have suggested is that in terms of PPE, we would look at the standard hierarchy of control. So when we're looking at risk assessment, we always start with elimination, substitution, etc., etc. PPE is always the last resort. So whilst PPE is always the last resort, we may have a bit of a shift change here with PPE when it comes to coronavirus controls. What we would suggest is that social distancing is the first measure, and where this can't be achieved practically or operationally, that's when you need to look at what the risk is from that particular task and how else you can control it. And really, we only to be looking at PPE options. With regards to face masks or face coverings, we are suggesting the standard surgical face mask is sufficient. And obviously, every operation and every task within an operation is going to be different. So that's why we need to risk assess. And PPE requirements will almost need to be done on a case-by-case basis, and also a person-by-person basis as well, because everybody's needs will be different. Think about PPE well ahead of time, though, because obviously we've got issues with supplies being in very, very high demand, and PPE being quite difficult to get hold of. Obviously, NHS staff do take priority when it comes to the availability of PPE. And just one final point on PPE, uniform. Uniform is part of your PPE requirements. We should be expecting that staff do not come into work already in their uniform. They need to change into their uniform at work and change out of their uniform before leaving work. And also making sure that there are strict arrangements on laundry. So ideally, what we would like to see is that laundry contracts are put into place, so staff don't have to take their own uniforms home. That's in an ideal world. If they are taking their uniforms home, they need to be washed ideally daily, and certainly on a hot wash and separately to any other clothing. But ideally, because it's important to manage this, it would be good to bring that laundry facility in-house and have it washed and provided in-house. The fifth point, I've already touched on it just now when we've spoken about PPE. The fifth point is conducting a risk assessment. The risk assessment, there's no leeway with this. It is a legal requirement, and it is a legal requirement to have carried out a specific COVID-19 risk assessment. So we need to ensure that the hazards have been identified. We've looked at who might be harmed and how, and what the risk is, and what controls need to be put into place to minimise that risk as far as is reasonably practicable. Now, this risk assessment will obviously ensure you've got your controls documented, so it forms part of your due diligence defence. And we have got some model risk assessments available for you to use. But as I've mentioned already, with regards to PPE, it does need to be carried out on a premises by premises basis, because every operation is different in a number of ways. Make sure as well, one of the important things to consider is that the risk assessment covers everybody. So it's not just looking at staff, it's looking at customers, it's looking at visitors and contractor management. So you have to look at everybody that's exposed in your business, and making sure that everybody's safe to be in the business and working in the business and visiting. One problem we've identified with risk assessments is that we may have created some issues by doing quick shutdowns. The lockdown happened quite quickly. Businesses may not have closed as effectively as they could have done. So we may have issues where problems have occurred during the close down or caretaking period. This could be things like pest infestations, waste accumulations, food stock not being managed correctly. So there's a number of issues that need to be thought about and thought through for the reopening phase. And we have general reopening guidance as well as COVID specific guidance available, which would cover all of those elements as well, on steps that you have to undertake when you first go back to the business if you haven't been for however many number of weeks. One thing to consider, and this can be done as soon as possible, even before going back to the property, is your statutory compliance. So you would need to check all of your statutory certification for electrics, gas, water. Make sure nothing's expired. Check your insurance, make sure that's not expired. And make sure you've got all of your facility safety check certification and documents in place. Routine PPMs may have lapsed during the close down as well, so you would have to reinstate those, although it's not legally essential that they are done prior to reopening, whereas a gas certificate would have to be in place prior to opening to make sure you're safe. Social distancing, step 6 of the 7 things you can do. Social distancing is obviously one of the key areas to look at. We can take a lot of best practice tips from supermarkets. We've been visiting supermarkets routinely, hopefully just once a week, in line with the lockdown measures. We can adopt a lot of the procedures and controls they've put into place in retail businesses, food businesses, restaurants, hospitality, etc. So social distancing is key. We would expect that there are clear routes of travel, ideally one-way systems wherever possible, and clear signage in place to instruct people on what the social distancing measures are. In advance of reopening, you may need to review the whole layout of your property. So you may need to take equipment or seating away, or tables. You may need to adjust the layout to make sure there's enough working space. If you've got an office space, you'll have to either put certain desks out of use, or change the way that they're actually laid out. If you've got such a small space to work to, and that isn't possible, then we would have to look at things like screening. So screening is almost like the last resort with the PPE. If you can't socially distance and separate, then you would have to have screens up. With social distancing, there are a lot of contactless operations and procedures that can be put into place. So hotel check-in, for example, can be completely contactless. Online ordering is very common these days. Contactless collection points. What we want to see is avoiding cash payments wherever we can, looking at contactless payments options. So the more controls you can put into place to prevent that 2-meter distancing from being compromised, the better. We've put more detail into our guidance about the use of floor markers, queue barriers. Again, the COVID champion would take control of that in terms of managing and monitoring what goes on once those controls have been put into place. Okay, so the 7th step is to look at potentially how we can give reassurance to businesses and reassure consumers and members of the public coming back into business. So when restrictions do start to relax and we get to the end of the phased reopening, we still will have that issue that people are a little bit fearful of returning to public areas, public spaces, shopping, etc., going into social premises. So there is a bit of a fear factor there. How do we know? How do the public know that they're going to be safe when they visit these types of premises? But also, how do we know that the controls are going to be effectively maintained? Well, what we can do is carry out a safety certification scheme. It's something that we've put together. We can verify that businesses have followed the guidance and that we're confident that the guidance is being adhered to, and it just gives that confidence and reassurance to the business operators, but also the certificate can be displayed on the premises, so it gives confidence, almost like it would you going to a food business and seeing a 5 food hygiene rating. We're giving you that reassurance that the premises is safe to visit. So just going into a little bit more detail then, we just wanted to cover some staff controls and manager controls. There's a lot more information in our sector specific guidance notes. So if you do want any further detail, if you want to pop a question on here, by all means do, but do also go to our guidance as well. Staff controls then, travelling to and from work. We want to make sure that wherever possible, and I know this is not always practicable, that staff do avoid the use of public transport for this interim period. And we would encourage the use of private vehicles or cycling or walking to work. Staff need to be quite flexible with their working hours. So again, from a management point of view, you can already start to look at your rotas, your staff hours. You may need to consider reducing the number of staff arriving to work at the same time and staggering the start and finish times, etc., and the way that the staff work together to make sure we've got the reduced capacity and restrictions in place for social distancing. The second thing to consider with staff controls is staff health declaration. So it's really important that prior to returning to work, all staff should complete a staff declaration. They are basically declaring that they are fit to work and that neither they nor anyone in their household or in close contacts have suffered with any COVID symptoms or similar COVID symptoms similar to COVID within the last 14 days. And that's really important. And that should be monitored on a daily basis when teams do start to return to work. So there's an element of screening every day to make sure that the teams aren't increasing that risk of infection within the premises. Moving on a little bit in a bit more detail about reporting of illnesses. Any staff member who suspects that they've got symptoms must report to their employer immediately. This is all part of the management controls and to prevent the spread of infection. The government guidelines at the moment would then need to be followed in terms of self-isolation. And we have got a lot of information in our sector-specific guides in terms of what to do, what action to take in the event of someone declaring that they've had symptoms. The symptoms are high temperature, new continuous cough, and loss or change to your sense of smell or taste. And as I've mentioned, where somebody has declared they have potentially got those symptoms or been in contact with someone that's got symptoms, self-isolation should start immediately. So if they're at work, they must be sent home to self-isolate following the correct guidelines. And we need to look at where they've worked within the premises, what equipment they've been in contact with, what tasks they've carried out, and make sure that you've got that enhanced cleaning and disinfection in place there for any areas that have potentially had that exposure. In terms of management controls, again, we are looking at reducing staffing levels, managing staff on site. And one of the top tips that we're looking at from a practical point of view is in those areas where you can't have the 2 metre social distancing, then we're recommending that pod working is implemented. So the same teams will work with the same people all of the time, again, to reduce that level of exposure. Also, considering staff training, it's important that prior to commencing work, returning to work, all staff should receive appropriate COVID awareness training, just giving basic information on the virus itself and what controls need to be in place within the workplace, and what they need to do in terms of their duty of care and responsibility for reporting any symptoms. This is really important because actually any confirmed cases of coronavirus that are evidence to be linked to have been contracted within the workplace are RIDDOR reportable. So it's really important that you have the management systems and the due diligence documentation available to mitigate any such circumstances. And finally, on management controls, we've just put together some information just as tips really and pointers. We do get a lot of questions about, well, you know, how would we social distance in these circumstances, or what would happen in the event of this happening, you know. So looking at emergency situations, obviously fire evacuation, people wouldn't have to remain the 2 meters apart. If doing so would put their life at risk. So thinking about fire life safety, obviously that would take precedence. So and people who are required to assist others during an evacuation, such as fire marshals, would have to have additional training and additional briefs on how their role would change in the event of a fire incident or a fire evacuation. In regard to first aid, with checking of training provision for your team, if you have qualified first aiders on site and their certificates have expired within this lockdown period, you can actually apply, contact your training provider, and they will be able to provide you with an extension for 3 months at the moment during this interim period. CPR can be given. It should be compressions only. This can be completed safely, but the person's face and nose should be loosely covered whilst that is taking place. But we have put a bit of extra detail in our sector guidance as well on these sorts of particular queries that we've had from existing clients. Okay, I'm going to hand back over to Dan now, who's going to talk about our resources and services that we've got available to help.
Okay, so we've mentioned a lot about guides, risk assessments, and things that we've put together. So we have both guides and risk assessments for hospitality and catering, pubs, leisure centres, and things like gyms, food retail, offices, hairdressers. So hairdressers also includes guidance which would be appropriate for beauty salons and things of that nature, hotels, non-food retail, and also vending machines, because that's something you also need to consider if you have those on your premises. So I'm just about to put a poll up on the screen, which basically just says, would you like more information about guidance and risk assessments for your industry? So that'd be really helpful so that we can make sure that we get in contact with you ASAP after this webinar and provide you with the information you need and next steps. So let's give you a couple of few seconds just to fill out the polling. It will be just on the right hand side. So we want to talk about some of the free services and resources that we have available. And what I'll do is I'll drop links to these at the end of this webinar just so you can click through and sign up or download them if you so wish. So we have our COVID-19 awareness course. So this has been really popular. And basically it gives an essential way for people to kind of understand what COVID is, how to spot the symptoms, and kind of what they should be doing if they are experiencing symptoms or someone in their household experiencing symptoms, and it touches on some best practice in the workplace as well. You can sign up for that for free from our store, and you will receive a certificate at the end of it to say you have completed that course. We also have our COVID-19 control guidance. So this is part of our certification program, which you can register for on our website. And this guide looks at steps necessary to ensure the safe reopening and explains how to complete the checks required. As I said, we do have detailed guidance for different specific industries, which were mentioned on the previous slide. But this is a great place to go register, get some guidance, and also ensure that you're the first person to find out about any future guidance that we produce, such as reopening checklists and things like that. So we really recommend, if this is something of interest, you head over to that link, which I will provide at the end, and sign up for those. So we do have a number of paid for services as well, because we appreciate that this is very difficult times and people are looking for as much help and support that they can get. So what we want to do is put together a lot of complementary services that you can take advantage of to ensure the safety of obviously your customers and your employees. So something we've referenced quite a lot in this webinar is our COVID-19 control certification audit. So we're able to do this either virtually / remote or an on-site audit as well. And basically what this is, it's similar to how you would have a health and safety audit or a food safety audit. And one of our environmental health practitioners will observe the controls for COVID that you've put in place and see if they're in line with the government's expectations and guidelines that they have produced. So in order to do this, what we've created is our own audit template, which is specifically designed just for this. And what we'll do is we'll go through that and make sure that all of the controls that you've put into place basically match what the government is saying that you need to have in place. If you don't have everything in place, we'll be able to advise at that stage, and we do provide a full report of all the findings that we've found at your business site. And then if you do pass, we can present you with a certification, which basically says that you have successfully passed our audit. All the controls we have observed have been in place and are successful. And what you can do is with that certificate, you can display that in your premises, you can put it on your website, you can share it on social media. And the whole point of this is it's providing confidence to your staff and any customers that they're safe to visit your business and you have suitable controls in place. And following on from that, for your employees, we have our Return to Work COVID-19 online course. So with all of our training from Navitas, it's all online using our digital academy software. It's dead easy to do. You just log in with a mobile phone, a laptop, tablet, whatever's best for you. And it's a series of multi-choice questions, kind of in a quiz format. And this particular course covers everything you could possibly need for your employees to make sure that they are aware of their responsibilities in line with COVID, make sure that they keep themselves safe, your customers safe, and just make sure that they're fully aware of the situation that they're returning to, because obviously we're in unprecedented times, so it's not a normal working environment. So we really recommend this course. It just really helps you provide that proof that you've made sure that your staff are sufficiently trained before return to work, and ultimately is trying to keep everyone as safe as possible. The third service, which is our software that we have available, which we've referenced a couple of things throughout the webinar, is you can do all your risk assessments, all of your checks. So if you have a COVID champion that you want to do daily checks, all of this can be completed and managed with our compliance software. So our compliance software is used by thousands of businesses, and we've recently added these new COVID checks into that and risk assessments, and basically allows you to complete all of these compliance processes in one cloud-based centralized system, and make sure that you can see when they've been done, who's done them, and anything that's not been done, such as your cleaning checks, for example. These will be highlighted so you can make sure that they are done, and ultimately it's just providing that really secure, accountable way to make sure your COVID and safety practices are being maintained and to the highest possible standard. Without having it as a software platform, if it was paper-based, it's very, very difficult to keep track of what's been done and what hasn't been done. So we really recommend people use a software system such as this, because it really just provides that transparency you need to make sure things are really safe. And then finally, the COVID-19 disinfection service. We've partnered with a business to offer this service. And basically what it is, it's like a disinfectant fogging service. So what they do is they'll visit your premises and they'll disinfect all surface areas. So this is particularly important for any businesses that have had known COVID cases, or businesses with lots of high traffic volumes where the risk is likely to be higher. And what they can do is they can come in, disinfect your workplace before everyone returns to work, to make sure there's no signs of COVID in your workplace before everybody comes back. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to drop on another little polling question here alongside the service menu. So if you can download these from the right hand side now, and basically that provides much more detail about each of these services. It's got some pricing in there, and kind of if you're just interested to find a bit more, that's a great place where you can go. I just want to add on another polling question as well, which just says if you'd like to know more about any of the services you provide, just say yes, please. So we'll make sure that we get in touch with you as soon as possible. So just want to briefly talk about pricing options. So what we've done is we've added different tiers. So obviously we appreciate that everyone wants to get as much safety practices as possible. So what we've done is we've added 3 different types of tiers. So the initial tier, so tier 1, is you get the mental health awareness training course, which obviously is a very, very big factor at the minute, and that's just something you can send out to all of your employees to make sure that they're aware of their own and others' mental health during this time. We provide the industry COVID-19 control guide, so these are the ones we mentioned previously, and it covers everything that you need to do from your specific industry. And we'll also provide the required risk assessments as a paper-based template for you to complete, and to make sure that you've put the correct controls in place. All of this documentation has been created by environmental health experts, so you can be sure that the information that you're getting is of the best quality and in line with government regulations. Second tier, which for some reason has been labeled as tier 3, but we'll call it tier 2, is where we're going digital. So as I mentioned, with the software system, you get everything that's part of tier 1, but we'll provide you with the risk assessment as a digital tool, and also the return to work course. So this is kind of covering everything you would need to make sure you're safe, as well as the guidance, but also giving you that additional training, and also a digital way to record your risk assessments. And then the final tier, again, you get everything with tier 1 and 2, but we'll also provide you with the COVID-19 digital checklist for your COVID champions, where every day they'll give the reminder of all your cleaning checks and relevant COVID safety measures to make sure these are done. Again, these are all in a software system which can be completed on an iPad or a phone, and just really ensures that these checks are being done, and gives you full transparency from a dashboard perspective, which shows that these checks actually have been completed. So you have that confidence that your business is as safe as it possibly can be. In addition, we'll also provide a remote audit for Tier 4. So this is where one of our environmental health experts will come and audit you and provide the certificate if you do pass all the controls, or advise you on what controls you'll need to put into place in order to pass the certification. Now, we do have a couple of additional services if you so wish. We can provide an on-site audit instead of a remote audit, and that's obviously $295 plus VAT. So we can switch that out for Tier 4 if you so wish. The disinfection service is price on inquiry. So if you just let us know if this is something you're really interested in, we can sort that out for you and give you some pricing. We also provide branded e-learning. So we created our own academy program, which is how we do all of our training, and we are able to create a specially branded one for your business. So if this is something you would like to do and offer training to your staff, we can do training on just about anything. So obviously you got all of the COVID ones. We have health and safety, food safety, training courses that we can also provide, and we can do bespoke training courses if you so wish. And again, the very popular compliance module that we provide as part of our software platform. We can provide additional modules such as food safety and self-auditing for sort of stuff in kitchens. And these are priced at £5 per module per month. So if you do want any more information on these, please just reach out, and we'll be more than happy to provide further information. So that's all from us. So I'm just about to drop on some of the resources where you can go sign up for the free guidance and the free training. So I've just shared the free COVID-19 awareness training, which you can sign up for. And I was about to sign up for the guidance, which is coming on your screen now. So that's how you can sign up for your COVID-19 guidance and all of the information that we provide coming out the back of COVID around safety. But as I said, if you do need any more information whatsoever, please just visit navitas.eu.com or send us an email at hello@navitas.eu.com, and someone will be able to get back in touch with you. And thank you to everyone who has been adding their questions onto this webinar. We've tried to respond to as many people as possible, but if we haven't responded to you yet, we will follow up with you after the webinar, so don't worry, we will get back in touch. So thank you very much again for joining us. Please stay safe, and we hope this webinar has been helpful for you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.